So welcome, Maria.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you for making the time and effort today. It took a while, didn't it, for us to align?
I know, it's like 6 months of like back and forth.
Yeah, but that's totally fine. I know life gets busy and it's meant to happen when it's meant to happen, so I don't try and force that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I reached out to you. Mm-hmm. I have probably the majority of our guests reach out to me.
Yeah.
But there was something, one day I was just, as I do, researching, scrolling through social media, and there was something that you spoke about which annoyed the absolute shit out of me, can I say, from being a mama bear myself and having a boy who's got medical complex, things going on as well.
Yeah.
But you spoke about beautiful Ozzie, and we will fully rewind on that. But the point I'm getting at today was about the medical records.
Yeah.
And not being able to access them.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to talk to this girl.
Yeah.
Like I think, the beautiful thing about this platform is advocating.
Yeah.
And speaking out.
Yeah.
And a lot of stories that we squash down and we suppress and we don't really get out there because we don't know where to start or we don't have anyone who's going to even listen.
Yeah.
So for me, having this platform and being able to do that is such a blessing. Mm-hmm. So I was like, right,
yeah,
I'm getting in touch.
Yeah.
And then I started to really look into, other stuff that you'd put up there and your beautiful family. And so, thank you for making the time.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
We just spoke about actually our common foundation is both being Poms.
Yeah.
You being a Donny girl.
Yeah.
And
I don't sound like it, but yeah.
Definitely don't sound like it. True Ozzie now for sure.
Yeah.
Married.
10 years married.
10 years married.
Yeah.
High school sweet. Well, you
pretty
were
much
best friends.
High school sweethearts. Yeah. Like we didn't get together till I was 20, Doug was 21, but we were best friends. So we had that, that foundation there, I guess. And one day I think we just looked at each other completely different and went, this can actually be more than a friendship. Yeah. So it was definitely meant to be. Yeah. Written in the stars.
Didn't look back from that.
No, I don't think we ever, it was just once we were together, we were one united front and we've always been that way. Yeah. So even with everything that we have been through, it would break so many people, but for us, it never did that. It made us stronger. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to actually talking about that a lot more because that's definitely something that I thought about with you going through what it is. Yeah. So you hear it so many times, and even guests that we've had on where relationships have broken down and things, and which is totally understandable. 100%.
Right? Yeah.
So, I commend you for that you've just actually clung on to each other, which is just a beautiful thing in itself. So life before children. So how long were you married?
So we got married in 2016. We actually had a pregnancy before Oskar.
Right.
So we lost that baby in September 2017.
Oh,
so it wasn't a full pregnancy. It was something called a blighted ovum. So the baby starts to grow and basically just disintegrates or, whatever, but the womb stays. So my womb was still there. So when they looked at the ultrasound, they said, look, the womb is still there. But we can't see the yolk sac and we can't see a fetal pole, which are like the main things they look for a viable pregnancy.
Yeah.
So we had to wait until 12 weeks. So I still had to keep having the morning sickness, having all the pregnancy symptoms. And then at 12 weeks, they pulled me in and said, look, there's obviously no baby on the scan. And so now we need to look at whether you take medication and go home and have a miscarriage at home, or we can do a D&C. So I opted for a D&C. So I had that done in September 2017. And we'd always planned to just let children happen naturally. We weren't trying for Oskar, but we weren't using protection either. So it was like, let's just see what happens. And, you know, I was working at the time as a disability support worker at Young Care. And, I found out that I was pregnant with Oskar in when was that? It must have been the March 2018. And everything was perfect with his scans. There was never an issue. At the 12-week scan, they said that they were looking at one of the parts of his heart, like one of the arteries in his heart, and they said it looks a bit smaller than normal. And I was like, okay. So I had the full microarray, like where they check, not microarray, sorry, it's called it's called something, but they basically check every little bit of the baby. They check the heart, they check the lungs, they check the brain, they check everything. And they said, no, he's perfectly healthy and we think this is just part of him. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So continued through the pregnancy. I was severely sick. I had hyperemesis gravidarum. So I vomited every single day. Oh. And I remember going and looking at rentals with my mum, and she was actually looking at the rentals while my head was in a vomit bag. Like, I just vomited and vomited and vomited and vomited. I had severe reflux. So it was not a nice pregnancy.
Was that the entirety of the...
Oh, I lost 6 kilos in the pregnancy. Oh, my gosh. I was tiny. And when I had Oskar, I was only about 55 kilos. Like, I was tiny. It was like the smallest I've been since high school after I just had a baby.
And there's nothing you can take, is there?
No,
like, you just have to put up with it.
I did try anti-nausea medication, but it didn't work. I think I tried everything. I tried the wristband that, like, you know, pressed on the like pressure thing. So like tried to stop the vomiting, and no, there was nothing. There was nothing I could take. God. So my mother-in-law tried to get ginger into everything, even though I hate ginger.
That's my mum.
I would literally sniff it out. Like, I was like, no, I know that there's ginger in this. So I did end up in hospital a few times throughout my pregnancy, just with, you know, not being well. So I was quite unwell through the pregnancy. And I later found out that a lot of the other mums who had children with the syndrome were also sick in their pregnancy. So there was that connection there. They all had hyperemesis gravidarum.
Wow.
Or most of them. So that was really interesting when I found that out. I was like, okay, is that like a link, you know? We didn't really know anything was wrong. And then at 36 weeks, I was at home. I had a curry for dinner, and I thought that I just had gas pain. And so I'm walking around the house thinking, oh, it's just gas pain. And got into the shower. My waters broke as I stepped into the shower, and I could feel Oscar's head.
No. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. So I screamed for Doug. Doug obviously called the ambulance. The paramedics came. They said, you 10 centimetres dilated. I had 4 men stood there looking at my
they say have a courage to bring on your
I know,
birth,
right?
but not
I
if
was
you're
not
still,
thinking, So I haven't eaten chicken tikka masala since that day. So I had these 4 men, including Doug, all stood there like this, like looking at me. And they said, look, you're basically ready to push. My contractions were 1.5 minutes apart. And you can either have him here or we can try and get you to the hospital. And knowing he was only a 36-weeker, I was like, my bedroom is not sterile. This is not a sterile environment. I would rather give birth to him in the ambulance because it's sterile.
Yeah, of course.
So let's just try and get to the hospital. So we got there, nearly gave birth on the M1, and 25 minutes after I got to hospital, he was born. It was about 4 pushes, I think, and he just came out.
Where did you go? Gold Coast?
Yeah, Gold Coast Uni. So I didn't get the birthing suite with the nice spa.
No.
I got like the back room because it was so busy. They were like, where are we going to put this woman? Because she's currently like about to have a baby. And so they just kind of threw me in this room, and my mum and sister got there 8 minutes before he was born. And then he came out into the world. There was about 40 doctors in there, I reckon. I had Oskar, then I gave birth to my placenta, and I could see them in the corner of the room, like holding my placenta up. And I didn't know what a placenta was supposed to look like. It was my first baby. Like,
yeah, of
course.
course.
Don't know what it's meant to look like. And I later found out that my placenta looked like someone had just got a hammer and smashed it to pieces. And so it didn't look normal. And that's
because it normally looks like a sack,
it's like a
doesn't
big
it?
sack. Yeah. Mine actually, with Tommy, it came out like a love heart, and they could actually pull the skin up, like where he was inside the sack. They could pull that bit up and show me where he was inside.
Yeah.
So that never happened with Oskar. It looked like a butcher had just like smashed this placenta. So they were currently looking at that. All the while we were trying to get Oskar to sort of latch onto my breast and have a feed. And I remember him coming up onto my chest and me thinking something's wrong.
Did
like,
you?
Yeah, like something is wrong.
Visually or just the knowing?
Yeah. I think a bit of both. He looked a little bit like a Benjamin Button baby. So we often say like he looked like an old man. And I mean, they do. Like when they come out, babies are very puffy and, you know, they've just been through this massive transition from being in the womb to then being earthside.
Of course.
And so I did expect him to look, you know, squished and stuff, but he just looked different. Like, and I was like, something's just not right. And then he was taken off my chest, and they were like, okay, we're going to take the baby to special care. You need to go for a D&C now, because I had retained placenta. So my placenta was like basically, they call it an abruption. So I had a placental abruption.
Okay.
So as Oskar was born, half the placenta came with him, like off my wall. So the rest stayed on the uterus wall, so they had to go in and remove that. I couldn't be put under anaesthetic because I just had my chicken tikka masala. So they had to give me an epidural. So I'm there, like, covered in blood. I had Oscar's poo in my hair. Just disgusting. And, like, literally sitting there in this gown. And I've got this 40-year-old man who is so lovely, but like, and he reminded me of my dad, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is just a crazy situation to be in. And so he's holding me, and I've just given birth, and so everything is sore, and I had to hunch over because to get the epidural, you have to be in like this hunched position. Oh, the pain. And so they gave me the epidural, so I had to be fully awake for them to scrape me out. And I had a vomit bag here, and the anaesthetist was holding it, and I'm vomiting the chicken tikka masala into the vomit bag. Like, it was just a hideous situation. And all I wanted to do was get back to Oskar. Like, I was like, I just want to be back with Oskar, you know. And so Doug had gone with Oskar, and my mum and sister were waiting outside the theatre for me. And I later found out, like maybe 2 years later, I said to my mum and Caitlin, did you know something was wrong with Oskar? Like, you must have known, you know. Like, my mum had 3 healthy babies. And they were both like, yeah, like, we knew, but we didn't want to say it, you know. I think Doug was the only one that didn't think something was wrong. He was very much like, no, he's just preemie, there's nothing wrong with him, you know. And so eventually I came back to the wing, and they said to me, right, when you can stand up, you can go and see him. So me being me, I was like, I can stand up. Yeah. So went to stand up, nearly fell over, and they said, how about we get you a wheelchair? I said, well, yeah, because otherwise I'm going to crawl down to see him. Yeah. So you've got an option of giving me a wheelchair. I'm not waiting till I can walk. You know, I knew that it was going to be probably 3-4 hours before I could properly walk. Yeah. And they said, okay. So they wheeled me down to him, and he was just amazing. Like, he was the most beautiful child, and he had this really dark black hair, and he was beautiful, you know, like he really was. And they'd already put an NG tube in to get food into him. So I was like, so why has he got that in there? You know, like, I want to breastfeed, and they're being oblivious at the time to what was to come. You know, I was like, I want to breastfeed him, and the nurses were like, oh, well, he's a bit preemie, you know, like, it's just, these things happen when they're premature, and they should come out within 24 hours. And I'm like, okay, all good, that's fine. And they said, how about you start pumping? So I started pumping, and they said, and you can pump, you know, and basically feed him through a bottle. And I was like, all right. And all the while we were still going to try and get him to latch. So it was just to try and help him, you know, feed and stuff.
Were you allowed to hold him skin on skin?
Yeah, because he wasn't in an incubator.
Right.
He was just a preemie baby, but everything was working fine. Like, his heart was working fine, lungs were fine. He was presumed healthy.
How much did he weigh?
6 pound 2.
Which is good.
Yeah,
like,
he was in 5 zeros. He was tiny. We had to go and buy him the 5-0 clothes. So my mother-in-law and my husband and I went off to Best and Less, and we got him the 5 zeros. It was so cute.
Don't expect that big.
Yeah, like this big. Like he was tiny. He was just like this tiny little poppet. But, you know, adorable. And one thing that really stood out to me was his eyes. He had very puffy eyes. And the doctors said, oh, no, that's fairly normal for a preemie baby, you know, that's just him. And that was that. So we came home. Oh, no, I stayed there for the first 2 nights. That's right. And I started losing my milk supply. So the nurses suggested that I go home because I was losing my milk supply, because the hormone that allows you to sleep is what helps with your breast milk.
Yeah.
And so every time a baby on the wing cried, I would wake up and they're like, you're not getting enough sleep, you know, and so go home and sleep. So I would wait till the night nurse came on to find out who they were and if I liked them enough and if I trusted them. And so I would wait for them. They came in, they would look after him for the night, and then I would go home and come back at 5 a.m.
Can I just say, though, that in itself, because I know what I was like with my first Evie. Yeah. I remember them just wheeling her out to give me some rest because she was just crying.
Yeah.
And I remember just yelling at Glenn, my hubby, just going, go and get her.
Yeah.
Because it's just this
weird feeling.
Just this belonging, get them with me.
Yeah.
So for you to go home is such a, obviously understanding, you know, to bring your milk on. Yes, I need the rest, but to be, you know, separated from him.
It was hard, but I knew that the nurses I did trust the nurses and midwives in there. The head of the department was absolutely incredible, and I knew that anybody that worked under her had to be doing their job properly.
Yeah.
And he spent most nights at the nursing station with them, wrapped in a little... They would carry him in like a carrier because he was kind of known as one of the babies that was a bit unsettled. And so, so they would carry him around in there, and I knew he was okay, but it still was very hard to go home. But also I wanted him to have my milk. So I had to weigh up my options. Of
course.
In the morning, I would wake up at about 4:30 and be like, I just need to get to him. Like, you know, like that feeling that you get where you're like, I need to be with Oskar. And I would like run up the corridor like to get to him. And when I got with him again, like it was like just a relief. Like, okay, we're here now for the day, you know. And then we would spend all day there. And that went on for 18 days. He was in there for 18 days.
And still conversation with the medical team?
So every day we had conversations with the medical team. I do remember being very cranky on one of the days when I got there. They had told me that I needed to bottle feed him in a sideline position. So you kind of hold them like this, so his head would be here, and then you would feed him the bottle like that. So in like a breastfeeding position, but that's just how he had to feed because he was not coordinating his feed properly. So breathing, sucking and swallowing, it's something that comes very easy to a baby. Like it's one of the first things that they can just do. Premature babies really struggle with that. Oskar wasn't premature enough to be struggling with that. So all of the other 36-weekers were going home and they were getting that skill. They were gaining that skill. Oskar wasn't gaining that skill. So it was like, okay. And this morning I'd come in and the whole medical team were around Oskar, and the speech therapist was in like this weird gown thing, like scrubbed up, and had gloves on and this hat thing on, and they're all sort of watching him feed. And I was like, is my child a science experiment right now? Like, what is happening? You know, like this is so sterile. There is no love coming from this lady. She's just got him held there like, and I was like, we're not doing this. Pass me my baby. Yeah. And I think she knew straight away. I was like, give me my baby now. I will finish the feed. And so I took him over into the corner and finished the feed. And, you know, nobody had spoken with me. Nobody had said, like, we're worried about him or anything like that. I think they just didn't want to say it, if I'm honest. I think nobody actually wanted to say it because knowing now, with the medical knowledge that they had to have known that something was wrong. So day 10, we had a doctor come in, Dr. Matt, and he came in. His bedside manner was horrific, but at least he told me the truth. And he came and said, basically, he doesn't look like you guys. And we were like, what? And so I said, well, who does he look like? Like, what are you talking about? You know, he looks like my husband. Like, and he did look a bit like Doug. So we'd all just said he looks like Doug. And, you know, it was like, well, he looks like my husband. What are you talking about? And he said, oh, he's got dysmorphic facial features, which dysmorphic facial features to me is such a horrendous thing to say about a newborn baby, because every baby is beautiful. Dysmorphic basically is like, you know, there's something wrong, they're deformed. And I was like, well, I don't think he's got dysmorphic facial features. And he's like, well, you know, he's got like quite a big gap between his top lip and his nose. He's got quite a low nasal bridge. Obviously his eyes are puffy and he's got eyelid imbrication. So that means that the eyelids came down too far. That's why he wasn't really opening his eyes fully. And he said, you know, this is just basically started pointing out things that were wrong. And my mum, thank God, turned around to him and said, are you saying he's got a disability? And the doctor said, well, yeah, but I can't really say. We just need to do a CT scan. So I was like, okay. So as soon as I left, I burst into tears. Obviously, the nurse came in and I knew her from uni. We'd been to uni together. And so she came in and gave me a hug and she's like, you know, everything's going to be okay. And so obviously then we were just stressed. It was like, well, what's wrong? You know, and syndromes were not on my mind at this point. I wasn't thinking chromosomal abnormality. I was thinking cerebral palsy. Like, you know, he's lost oxygen from the placental abruption.
Yeah.
He's probably got cerebral palsy. And when he came out onto my chest, he flicked his head up like this and looked around the room. And the doctor said, I've got a video on my phone, and you can hear her saying, oh my God, he's so strong. No, he wasn't strong. His body was going into like a position, basically what a lot of people with CP do, where they throw their head back like that and they can't get out of that position. It's like high tone. They call it like increased tone. But at the time, you know, we didn't know that, again, being first baby. And so he had a CT scan that day. It was one of probably the worst days of my life, waiting. Like, it felt like weeks. And 24 hours later, we got the results and they came back and said, perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with his brain. And I was like, okay, so what now? Like, what is wrong with him? And we never got any answers. It was just, we don't know what's wrong. You'll go under the paediatrician. So his paediatrician was Dr. Vu at the Gold Coast Uni Hospital. And they said, you'll go under Dr. Vu and basically watch him grow and see what happens. And we were like, okay. So we had to then work on 24 hours of him feeding from a bottle and not having the tube before we could go home. So we got to that point. It was like a step by step. Everything was a step. You know, we got to the step where he was feeding from a bottle and it was like, okay, now you can go home. And on the way out of the special care nursery, we were singing the Sesame Street song.
Yeah.
Because,
can you tell me?
Yeah. Because his nurse, Alice, who was like, she was like a real life princess. She would sing to him because he had these little sesame seed pants, street pants with the Elmo on the back on his bum. And she would sing it to him. And I remember saying to Alice, like, can I just take you home? I'm going to keep you in my spare room. You can get up through the night with him, because she was so just loving with him. And yeah, she was just an amazing, amazing nurse. Like, you can't thank people enough for being there in those vulnerable times. And the nurses all there, they were like, can you come work here? You know, like we all just, we built a really strong bond. And we used to have a joke that he was going to be 18 and we would still wheel him around in that little crib around the NICU and the special care.
And you need that, don't you?
Yes,
you need that love and affection.
But I think what kept me going through that time was we were attached to the NICU unit. We weren't allowed in the NICU unit. But I saw the parents coming in and out of there. And, you know, our baby was doing so well compared to those babies. So how could we be ungrateful and be upset? And, you know, like to me, it was like, these people have got it so much worse. Like, they've been in there for weeks and months. And, you know, some of these babies are born at 22 weeks. And Doug had a cousin whose baby was born at 500 grams and spent months in NICU. And thank God she's okay now and she's perfectly healthy. She just turned 12, you know, and her name is Angel. And I think, like, to see what those people went through, our journey just through special care nursery was not that bad. You know, we didn't know what was to come, but it wasn't actually that bad. So I always sort of looked at the positives, but going home was so scary. Like, it was like, this is me now and Doug's going back to work in a week. And Like, I've got this
and still
baby.
no answers, really.
No answers. Just, take him home and do what you need to do, love him. And so that's what we did. And I think by 8 weeks, so we had a microarray test done, which tests all the chromosomes. So 8 weeks, I went into the doctor, and Dr. Jennifer Deacon. Anyway, she was a character, and she basically said to me, there's nothing wrong with your baby. You are just a delusional mother. He's fine, and because I questioned cerebral palsy, and she said, the microarray has come back. There's no chromosomal abnormalities. He's perfectly healthy. Go home. And I came out of that thinking, am I mental? Like, am I going crazy? Am I in postpartum depression? Like, is there something wrong with me? Am I just making something wrong with him, And by 6 months, we had gone back to Dr. Vu, because we were going back and forth all the time. But by 6 months, Dr. Vu finally said to me, there's something wrong. We need to be doing a genome test on him to test for all of the genes. Now, I still had no idea about all of the syndromes that were out there that you could have, and all of these different gene sequencings that could be wrong, and I had no idea. And so that's where I kind of started my study on these different syndromes and going, I think he does have a syndrome, and actually he doesn't really look like us. Like, if you put our baby photos next to his, he doesn't really look like us. And it was at that point that I think the doctors were on board, that they were like, okay, he's not sitting up. He's not doing anything that a baby at 6 months old should be doing.
Is he feeding okay still?
He was, but he had failure to thrive. So he was very, very small. They always were on the cusp of putting that NG tube back in. Like, it was the days that I would sit there crying, just trying to get him to feed and just have some milk, and I was pumping. I actually had enough milk for twins because it caused an oversupply. And so, he was getting nutritionally enough, but it was just trying to get him to drink and coordinate those feeds was so challenging. And at 6 months, I would take him to the shops, and I think he was, I don't know, maybe 4 kilos at the time. And people would say to me, how old is your newborn? He was just tiny. He was a tiny, tiny little person. When he was 1, we could stand him up, and, he was just tiny. He was just a small person.
So was he crawling and things?
No.
Not doing any of that?
No, he was like a newborn in every single way, basically. He never learnt. At this point, he was not sitting up. He was smiling. He was laughing. He could coo. He would make noises, and, he would look for us. In the room, he could track us with his eyes. But he also had nystagmus, so his eyes would flutter back and forth, so he couldn't control his eye movements properly. So we started physio, we started occupational therapy at that point. It was get early intervention on board. We got the package that you get before NDIS. I can't remember what it's called. But it's a package where they give you $6,000, and you've got that to spend on therapies before you go under NDIS. So we were kind of going along that pathway of he's got a disability. But at this point in my in the process, I really thought he just had cerebral palsy still. I really didn't think it was a syndrome until I started researching syndromes. And then I was like, he's definitely got a syndrome. It's just which one he's got. So I looked at Kabuki syndrome. He very much looked like he had Kabuki syndrome. There's a lot of the features. There was also Angelman syndrome, where they're very happy and have these big smiles and they don't sleep. So he woke every hour at night. So I did think he had that at one point. Yeah, so Angelman syndrome, and then there was the Kabuki syndrome, and Noonan syndrome was on the cards too. There were so many different syndromes that I had no idea even existed.
And are you just frantically Googling, 100%. Researching?
I'm speaking to geneticists in Brazil on the phone in the middle of the night. I knew at that point that there was something not right with Oskar, and I was going to find out what it was, and we were going to help him the best that we could. And that was just going to be it. And, they told us at that point there was a 95% chance our marriage would break down, statistically. And I was like, who tells somebody that? For a start.
Do you know that's such a common theme?
Yeah.
With other guests that we've had in, circumstances medically with their child, that's been one of the first things that's been put to them.
Yeah. And it was just like we did go through that question of, okay, what if it's us? What if I carry something, right? Or what if Doug carries something that has passed on to Oskar? But we sat down and we had that conversation and we were like, it's not our fault. Like, this is not our fault. It's not, even if Doug had carried a gene, it's not his fault. We would have had IVF or done something to be able to have other children.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know.
But you don't know.
Yeah,
like, you know, like, we would never have blamed each other. Oskar to us was perfect. So we did not care what he had. Yeah. We just wanted him to be loved. And it was scary bringing him into a world where everyone was going to judge him. But I didn't care about that. I was like, I will be his advocate for the rest of his life. You know, like, I'm not going to let anybody say anything about him where they're not saying he's basically perfect. So I had been researching, and just before his first birthday, we went and saw Dr. Milnes, who is the geneticist for Queensland Children's Hospital, I believe. Or it could be Queensland Health. But she's a children's geneticist. She's one of the major ones on the Gold Coast, Brisbane. And she took one look at him and she said, you know, when I look at Oskar, I think he's got trisomy 8 mosaicism. And I was like, okay. And she said on the bottom of his feet, he's got these 3 lines. So on the bottom pad of his foot, so if you look at your hand here, it's supposed to be quite flat. And obviously you have that there. But he had 3 very distinct lines. Looked like a cat's foot.
Right, and you'd not
we
really...
never noticed. Like, we never thought, you know, babies' feet are all squishy and wrinkly. So I knew that he had the single palmar crease on his left hand. That's a genetic thing that comes from my granddad and my uncle on my mum's side. My second son also has that. So we knew that was a genetic thing. But definitely I knew that he had that crease, and I looked at his right hand and his right hand didn't have it. And I was like, I don't know if it's a chromosomal thing. And so trisomy 8 mosaicism is not something you want your child to have, but basically it's where they have an extra chromosome 8, and it's only in some of their cells, not all of their cells. If it's in all of their cells, it's incompatible with life. If they have it in some of their cells, you know, they still live, but they are very sick children. So they have lung problems, they have hearing problems, usually eye problems, sometimes seizures. So it, you know, was quite scary when she said that. And I joined the trisomy 8 group, mosaicism group, and I was like, oh my gosh, Doug, he looks like these children, you know, like he looks like he's got the facial features. And even now, like when I put him next to, a photo of him next to children with trisomy 8, you would look at that and go, yep, like that is what he looks like he has. A lot of his features and symptoms correlated with trisomy 8. So then I researched that heavily and I went down that pathway of that's what he's got and how are we going to help him. You know, I started talking to other parents, and so Oskar was 14 months when they got the results. They had to put him under for an MRI, and they did a skin biopsy. So they take a segment out of the bottom of his foot and they do a full gene paneling on him basically. Wow. And so he went in for that. He would have been about 1 when he went in for it. And at 14 months, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. So Tommy was a surprise baby. No surprise. And obviously I had planned on having other children, but once we found out what Oskar had. So I remember being in the car with my sister and being like, I feel sick. She's like, you need to take a pregnancy test. I'm like, don't be stupid. I'm not pregnant. You know, like I'm definitely not pregnant. And went back to mum's house, peed on the stick, and, you know, the 2 lines came up straight away. I was actually 8 weeks pregnant. So I was, you know, wow. And I remember just driving home thinking, oh my God, like how am I going to parent 2 disabled children? Because I just automatically assumed this baby was going to have what Oskar had. Yeah. And so I was scared at that point. Like I was like, how are we going to do this? You know, like this is going to be so, so difficult. And I don't believe in abortion necessarily. I believe there's reasons for it. And it's a personal choice, and I would never judge somebody for doing that, for making that choice at all. But it wasn't a choice I wanted to make personally. Yeah. And I was like, holy moly, like, you know, I just don't know what to do. And so when we went back for the results of the microarray, that's what it's called, not the microarray, sorry, the full gene paneling. So we went back for the full gene paneling results, and Dr. Milner sat me down and she said, he's got Nicolaides-Baraitser Syndrome, and I've never heard of it before. And
all your research, that had never been flagged to you either?
No.
Okay.
And so Nicolaides-Baraitser Syndrome, Oskar was the 100th person diagnosed in the world. So it is one of the rarest syndromes known to man.
Oh my gosh.
There would be more children with it in third world countries that aren't registered having it. But at that time, he was the 100th person diagnosed and the third in Australia. So she had never come across it before in all of her studies and research. She'd never heard of it. You know, I don't even think she knew how to pronounce it, if I'm honest with you. I think I had to go home and like research how to pronounce this syndrome. So Nicolaides is obviously like the pathology place, Nicolaides. So Nicolaides-Baraitser Syndrome, and the two geneticists or doctors who found the syndrome, it was named after them. So it was Dr. Nicolaides and Dr. Barrister, and that's how they put it together. And the first person diagnosed, I believe, was 1998. It was a female.
So recent.
Yes, yeah. It was a girl called June, and I can't remember where she's from. But yeah, this girl called June, basically her parents helped set up the NCBRS Foundation, and she passed away when she was 33, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but she was in her 30s. So that was kind of promising. You know, we were told he would live a full life. I remember sitting there with Dr. Milnes and just saying, like, she's running through all the things that he could have, and she's like, you know, they can have drug-resistant epilepsy, and a lot of them, you know, have trouble with eating, and she's just, like, running through this list, and I'm just sitting there. My mum's sitting next to me, Oscar's in the pram, and I just said to her, I said, so what is the life expectancy? Like, I don't really care, just tell me the life expectancy. And she said, he should be an adult. He should get to being an adult. You know, we can't really tell you what his life expectancy is, but we know that most of them make it into being an adult. And I was like, okay. And I think I just took a sigh of relief at that point, because I was like, he's not going to die as a child. You know, I'm not going to be one of those mums that loses him young and all of that. And she said to me, you're very stoic. You know, like, you're a very stoic person. You're not crying. You're not upset. And I said, well, I am upset. I said, but Oskar is perfect. Like, I'm not going to sit here and cry when I'm looking at my child who I love more than anything in the world. I think I felt like crying over him having that syndrome at the time would make me feel guilty in a way, because it's like crying about having him. But I later found out that's not the case. You know, you're allowed to cry and grieve the child that you expected to have.
They can coexist.
Yes, they can coexist.
Yeah.
And, you know, we expected Oskar to be playing football. We would talk about that when I was pregnant with him. You know, he's going to play footy and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And like you do when you're having a child, you know. So
you're grieving the life, which is all fantasy, really, isn't it? Because it's
but
what
you still have
created.
that grief of, I've lost this child that was supposed to be neurotypical.
Yeah.
And he's not neurotypical, and it's okay to grieve that, but still love Oskar more than anything, and still accept who he is, you know. And so for me, I left that day obviously upset, but feeling like we could manage this. We can deal with it. We now know what he's got. We can join all the groups. We can, you know, do the best that we can for him. Because
it'd be the uncertainty, I would imagine.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty.
Where you just want answers and people to actually go, because for so long they're telling you he's fine, and you're absolutely knowing
he's got this, or he's got that, and you're researching those things and then finding out actually he doesn't have this and he doesn't have that. And, you know, so Dr. Milnes, basically, that was her job done. She then goes and drops off the face of the earth. Basically, you never see those people again, which to me is very bizarre. You know, you would think that they would keep up to date with what is happening. But I think because his syndrome, again, was so rare, there's really nothing to compare him to. So it was, so we never saw her again. And then I started joining all the groups, obviously found an entire family across the world of, you know, people whose children have Nicolaides-Baraitser. And the moment that I researched it, there was no question in my mind. He looked more like those children than he looked like us. Like, it was just the facial features matched, you know, the big smiles, the little noses. Like, we used to say he looked like a pixie, and a lot of them, like, they look like little pixies. You know, they've got these little ears that stick out a bit and the little squinty eyes. And, like, yeah, it just, to me, was like, bingo. Like, we found our people, and we had so much support from those people. Like, people from the UK, you know, like, people from America, people from Scotland. We had another lady, Lara, from Sydney. So her son is 11 now, I think, Alex. And so he's got Nicolaides-Baraitser as well. And they came down to the Gold Coast to see us, which was amazing. It was so, so good. And, you know, they were a huge support. Like, when we were in hospital with Oskar, like, and at the time, you know, only Doug was working. Like, I couldn't work. And so obviously we dropped from 2 wages to 1 wage. So that affects your income very drastically. And so we had GoFundMes and stuff. And she would literally just, like, be like, right, I'm going to organise food for you. And we would come home and she'd just send, like, packages from the dinner ladies and, like, just the most humble and giving and beautiful people. And we made a really strong friendship, and that friendship will always be there. I don't think you can ever get rid of that. And, you know, all over the world, like, we've got friends with kids with Nicolaides-Baraitser, and we always plan to go and meet and do a big, because they do big group meetings. We always planned to go and do that with Oskar. We just never kind of got the chance to you know, do it. And
but
so
it's just, there's something beautiful about, obviously you wouldn't wish it on anyone, would you? But, but there's something beautiful about having people who have walked or walking in those shoes that just get it. Yeah. Because no one else gets it.
No, they don't.
You know, if they're not going through exactly that same thing. And even then, you've all got different journeys and different stories. Yeah. But it's just that camaraderie, isn't it? I would imagine that they just get it.
Yeah, they do, 100%. On, like, a different level. Yeah. And, like, nobody else really understood it. You know, like, my friends that I was friends with at the time didn't understand. No. It was like all their babies were healthy, you know? So it was, they just didn't quite get it. Whereas these people 100% got it.
So it'd be quite isolating.
A little bit isolating, yeah. I think I just threw everything into raising Oskar. We found out that Tommy was not going to have the syndrome because it was a 0.01% chance that he would get it. So it's something called de novo, which means that Doug and I don't carry the gene. So when the egg and sperm meet, basically the gene, so it's the gene number 9, the SMARCA2 gene inside the gene 9 basically has a deletion on it or a misspelling, and that's what causes the syndrome. So it's like, 1 in a million chance you're going to have a child like that.
Insane.
It is. And it still baffles me to this day that it's my story. Like, you don't think it's going to happen to you.
But at the same time, he was meant to be here.
100%, he was meant to be here.
All of that, all the odds against him,
he was supposed to be
meant to be here.
Yeah, and we took that, and that was one of our things, was he's meant to be who he is. You know, he's not supposed to be neurotypical, and this is part of our life journey. And, you know, so Tommy obviously was born neurotypical. And we were just obviously ecstatic that we'd been able to have a neurotypical child, because it is so different to having a child with special needs and high care special needs as well. So, you know, we had Tommy, and very quickly Tommy became the helper. You know, he would help with the feeds. He adored Oskar. People thought they were twins for a period there because I dressed them the same, obviously matching outfits were just ridiculous.
Of course you would.
And, you know, people thought that they were twins because they were like the same height and stuff. By the time Tommy was 9 months old, he had outgrown Oskar. So we used to call him the little big brother because he was smaller than Tommy. But Tommy adored him. He used to come to all the therapies, and, you know, it was great. It was a really great time in my life where Oskar wasn't actually that sick. He was just delayed. You know, he was delayed, but he wasn't sick. He wasn't in the hospital all the time. He would get viruses very quickly. Rhinovirus was pretty much a month-to-month thing. but he would get over it quickly as well. So, you know, it was a really nice time for us as a whole family. And, you know, the statistic of the 95%, me and Doug, that was not an option. That was never going to come into our lives. And I think we had both just decided that. And having parents who were together, like my parents are still married, Doug's parents are still married. And I think it's very much a cultural thing where, you know, you don't get divorced unless it's really bad, you know. And obviously I'm not against divorce. If you think that, you know, it's not working, 100%. But for me and Doug, that never came into the equation. We were just going to support each other no matter what. So then Oskar had his first seizure when I was 7 months pregnant with Sophia. So
you'd had none prior to that?
And we were kind of a little bit naive. Like, we were speaking to the people on the NCBRS group and we were saying, like, what age did your child start having seizures? And they were all around the age of 1. And so I kept saying to Doug, like, if we can get him past 2, he might not have epilepsy. Like, he's, you know, maybe he'll just be one of the 2% or whatever it is of kids that don't get it.
Yeah.
And I think we were told it was like 96% chance. Like, it was a very high percent chance that he would have epilepsy and that it would be drug resistant. And so, but I didn't think I was going to lose him to epilepsy. Like, that was not, you know, we just thought he'll get treated for it and that would be it. So when I was 7 months, I was in the bedroom folding washing as you do. Tommy was listening to Hot Potato and Oskar was laying on the couch in the lounge room. Tommy was having a dance.
How old was Tommy at this stage?
So 2.5.
2.5, yeah.
Oskar was 3.5 and Sophia was, I was 7 months pregnant with Sophia. Yeah. And so, they were just in the lounge room. I could hear them laughing and giggling together. And the next thing, everything just went quiet. And Tommy came into the room and he said, Oscar's vomiting. And I'm like, what? And so Oskar would vomit quite often. He had gastrointestinal problems and obviously having the tube and everything in, like, it was quite often that he would vomit. And the tube was in and out of his nose at this point as well. So sometimes he had it, sometimes he didn't. Like, it was quite common for him, for us to go to hospital and then say, look, we've got to put it back in. At the time, he didn't have it in. But, you know, anyway, so he said he's vomiting. So I dropped the washing basket, ran to the couch, and he was not vomiting. He was foaming at the mouth. So he was having a tonic-clonic seizure. And I remember just, like, looking at him for a second and then being like, holy shit, he's seizing. And knowing, with my background of being a disability support worker, I was very, very fortunate in my job that I got to work with people who were quadriplegics, and mainly acquired brain injuries was what we dealt with. Some multiple sclerosis, you know, functional neurological disorder. And so I had seen a lot of seizures. We could have 3 seizures going at one time. And I knew that he needed midazolam ASAP. And so I basically ran back to the bedroom, grabbed my phone. My heart was obviously nearly beating out of my chest, like just the stress.
And you're pregnant.
Yes, I know. And so I called 000 and it was just, you know, is the patient breathing? And I'm like, well, yeah, but he's 3 and he's having a tonic-clonic seizure. Well, has he had seizures before? I'm like, just get the ambulance here. Like, I don't need the question here. Like, you know, I know they have to ask questions, but just get them here. And so I'm screaming down the phone, he needs midazolam. You know, his heart rate, so his respiratory rate was 8 resps per minute. So it should be around 20. He was going pale. I'm like, he's not breathing. So I grabbed him onto the floor and put him in the recovery position. And I reckon 3 minutes, the paramedics were there. So I had to run to the door, unlock the door.
Longest 3 minutes of your life.
Yep. Ran back to Oskar. And then there was just wires, there was tubes, there was everything happening at once, you know, the ECG cables being hooked up to him. And I could hear them saying, like, we're going to have to intubate him. We need critical care here now. The next thing, the guy comes in, the SUV, which is critical care. We made pretty good friends with critical care over the years. He comes running in. He's like, we're probably going to have to intubate him. His blood sugar levels were up at like 30 and nobody knew why. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, is he diabetic? You know, and they're like, what is he eating? I'm like, listen, he had custard like half an hour ago. Like, you know, but his blood sugar levels
which is not at the norm.
Should not be at 30.
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous. So they ended up, I think they dropped back down, but drastically low. So they're like, we're going to have to try and get some juice into him. So they're trying to get juice in. Like, it was just wild. It was absolutely wild. And I'm thinking, oh my God, is he diabetic? You know, like, is this going to be one of the diagnoses? And that's why he's having a seizure. Because obviously if your blood sugar levels become really high or really low, that can make you have a seizure.
Yeah.
So epilepsy wasn't on the cards. Again, it wasn't, I was thinking he was diabetic. And so they asked if I had a family member to come look after Tommy, but all my family were 30 minutes away. So we were living at Coomera at the time. They were all in Robina. So I'm like, this is a 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
So I said, right, I'm getting in the car with Tommy. I'm going to drive behind you. And they were like, okay, drive safe, which didn't happen. So I'm driving behind them at like 140 down the M1. And Tommy's in the back of the car going, look, Mum, there's an ambulance. And I'm like, yes, honey. Like, you know, trying to just downplay it for Tommy because obviously I'm trying to protect Tommy at this point. I'm like, I can't have him seeing this. You know, he's 2.5 years of age.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, it's an ambulance, baby, you know, blah, 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 blah. And just talking with him the whole way there, calling my husband, calling my parents, saying, you know, you need to get to Gold Coast Uni Hospital now. So by the time we got there, my parents and Doug were there. I don't know how they got there. I've never asked them how they got there that quick, but I know that it wasn't legal what they were doing because I think they just flew there. So my mum and dad took Tommy, they took him, and Doug and I ran into resus, children's resus, which is not a room you ever want to go into. And we went in there, and obviously Oscar's just hooked up to machines. There's like probably 30 people in the room. They're getting things into his femoral arteries. You know, talking about intubation. Obviously, he's still seizing at this point, and they've gone to phenobarb, which is like the third line. So they have so many drugs they go through before they get to intubation. So they got to phenobarb. I think the next one was phenytoin. Don't quote me on that. And then the next one was intubation. So I'm like, we're already at phenobarb, and he's still having a seizure. And, you know, like there's all these people literally dressed in like Easter scrubs because it's just been Easter, and they've all got Disney scrubs on, and the room's like, it just didn't look like a room where kids die. But it is. That's what it is, you know, and it was so traumatizing. But at some point when I got into that room, my body went into calm mode. I don't know how, but it just went calm. It went from my heart rate beating like, you know, probably 180 a minute to back to normal, and just me being like, okay, you need to be calm for him. And Doug was kind of freaking out, but in his own way. Like, he goes very quiet and stoic. And so, pardon me, he was sat there, like stood there, very easygoing as well. And I'm like, okay, this is his history. This is his doctor. I had to remember all of that on the, you know, so I had to calm myself down.
Yeah.
And so I gave handover basically to them about who Oskar was, and eventually one of the doctors came in and he said he stopped seizing, and we were like, okay, thank God. You know, like, take a breath. Okay, he stopped seizing. But his GCS was a 3, which is basically you're in a coma. So he was not responding. He was breathing on his own, but that's basically it. And they said, we're going to move you to one of the side rooms, and critical care will come down and see you. And we were like, okay. So critical care came down, and by the point that they got there, it was probably 30 minutes later, he started stabilising a bit. So he was starting to wake, to rouse a little bit, and we were like, okay, we're in the clear. We're good. You know, we're okay. And so he came out of that. He came out of that situation, and we nearly lost him, but he came out of it, and we were like, okay, now we can go home. He stabilised. GCS came back up to 15. He was back at his baseline. Breathing was all good. And so I think we were probably in hospital for maybe 2 or 3 days overnight, because we stayed, like we had to stay obviously, because he'd been given ketamine, phenobarb, like, you know, he'd been given enough drugs to knock out a bloody horse. How he woke up, I'll still never know, but he was so resilient. Like, he was just unbelievable, this child. And very, very, very low pain threshold. So he, or high pain threshold, sorry. So he didn't really feel pain very much, which was a good thing. I took that as, you know, that was a positive, because at least he wasn't upset every time they were putting IVs in. And So we came home. We didn't have an epilepsy diagnosis because they didn't know what the seizure was from, whether it was from low, high blood sugar. He wasn't diabetic. Everything just came back to normal. And it was one of those medical anomalies where you're like, so what happened? And they were like, we don't know. And that's it, go home. If you see more seizures, record them. And I was like, okay. By 6 months later, we had probably 8 different types of seizures that he was having, including focal seizures. He would have absent seizures, drop seizures, tonic-clonic seizures. Like, it was just constant.
And that's the thing as well on that, because so many people, again, they don't know what they don't know, but not having friends with children who have seizures and stuff. There's all different variations,
There's so
isn't
many
there?
different seizure types. And I didn't know that. I knew that there was tonic-clonic, which is what most of the residents that I worked with had. But I certainly didn't know until I started, really researching epilepsy. And then when you research epilepsy, it tells you about epilepsy for neurotypical people. It doesn't tell you about epilepsy for non-neurotypical people or people that have these really severe genome problems or, these children with high severe disabilities. It doesn't talk about epilepsy for those children, where it can be a multitude of seizures and a multitude of different types, and they are drug resistant, And so I think by about 6 months after that, we had gone under neurology, and he was now on Epilum, which is to stop the seizures, basically. Now, Epilum took so much away from Oskar. It took his ability to swallow. He could no longer swallow when he started taking it. Because, again, everything's a catch-22 in the medical world. So here's drugs to stop seizures, but also he's not going to be able to swallow. He's not going to be able to hold his head up. He'll lose the ability to sit. He won't be able to go on all fours. All the things
without that, he would continue to have seizures and
probably pass away anyway. So it was just, everything was a catch-22. So at that point, I really started looking into medicinal cannabis and how we could look at natural things for him.
Yeah, of course.
So we went to Nimbin, to the back.
Did you?
The back pharmacy. The old back pharmacy in Nimbin. And we actually started him on CBD oil. And so I told the doctors, I was very honest with them, we used to take it into the hospital with us. And they would say, we can't give it to him. I'm like, I know you can't, but I'm giving it to him while we're here.
Sure.
And it did stop his seizures. It helped a little bit. I wouldn't say it fully helped, but it stopped a lot of his pain. It helped with his sleeping. It helped with his stomach and being able to digest things a little bit better. So it eased some of his symptoms, but I wouldn't say it was a miracle cure by any means. It wasn't.
So you still giving him...
I was still giving him the modern medication that the doctors had told me to give him.
Yeah.
But that's because I was too scared really to take him off them.
Of course.
I tried to wean him off Epilum and his seizures just increased tenfold. So it was like, we can't take him off Epilum.
Yeah.
We have to keep him on that. And also the pharmacist in Nimbin never said to us, take him off all his medication. They said, keep him on these medications. And basically it's going to be like a trial. And we're going to put him on this alongside his medications. And I had done hours of research before I took him to Nimbin. I didn't just pack him in the car and take him to Nimbin.
Of course
like
not.
I had read stories upon stories upon stories of people with children who were on medical cannabis. And a lot of the children, obviously in America and Canada with NCBRS, where it's legalized in certain states in America and in Canada, it's legalized. And so those people were contacting me saying, our children are on this and their seizures are doing better. So it was like, well, that's what we need to do for him. He was also on chloral hydrate, which is a sedative. So that would sort of help him go to sleep and to stop the seizures as well. So we did that. He went on the chloral hydrate as well because I needed to sleep. And 4 years of waking every 2 hours was just...
And you're still pregnant at this stage? Or
No, I've had Sophia. So Sophia came into the world. Oskar absolutely adored her. He loved babies. So my nephew and Sophia were born 9 weeks apart. So we had
beautiful.
2 babies and it was just the most incredible experience. My sister actually tandem breastfed both of them and so did I. Like it was a really beautiful, beautiful time. And the bond that Gus, my nephew, had with Oskar was the kind of bond you can only say would be a soul connection. It was like Gus knew Oskar was different. And from age 1, he would run up to Oskar and crawl into his wheelchair and like sit with him and cuddle him. And like even Sophia, like the way that children are with children with special needs,
they have a
just
knowing,
baffles
don't
me.
they?
Like it's unbelievable. And Sophia just thought the sunshine out of his eyes. Both Tommy, Sophia and Gus, like there was no difference. It was just Oskar. You know, he was just him and we all just loved him and that was it, you know, and the bonds were absolutely beautiful. It was really a special time. You know, Oskar loved babies and we would have these photo shoots with them and we'd dress Oskar up and, you know, it was really an amazing time.
Obviously you know, all that you, if you just had Oskar alone to do what you had to do on a day-to-day basis and through the night and so forth is massive.
Yeah.
But then to have 2 other children,
I know,
and
to have
be
3 under 4.
these, it was just
wild.
insane.
Yeah.
And obviously that's, you know, like massive kudos to you as well. Just to be, you're obviously a person who's very inside you might be screaming, but on the outside relaxed and
I kept my cool a lot, but there was days when I would lose it. Like I would just be like, I can't do this, you know, like he was on 24-hour tube feeds at this point. Sophia was breastfeeding every 2 hours, you know, and then I had Tommy as well, who was a toddler and needed me, and he would also wake up through the night, you know.
So how would you do that? How would you split your time? And
it was really hard. So by the time Oskar was 4, we started looking for support workers. So that was the point where I was like, Doug, I need support workers because you are working. Somebody had to work. Somebody had to bring in the money. So as much as Doug wanted to be there, that wasn't an option.
It's so hard for him too.
Yeah,
because,
like he had to go to work
like
every day.
He's
and
wanted to stay home and
get
help.
These manic phone calls from me going, Oscar's having a seizure, we're going in the ambulance,
Yeah.
you know, and like it was so hard. And thankfully he worked under his friend at work, and so his friend was basically his boss and was very understanding of us circumstances, and the whole company were very understanding, and we appreciate that so much because if he had been in any other job, I don't think they would have been able to keep him, you know, because he was there half the time, not there half the time. And sometimes it was like, right, we're in hospital for a week now, and he would just, you know, have to split his time between us and work and the kids. And my parents were a huge support. Like I would just throw Sophia and Tommy at them, literally just like grab the kids, and that was it. I had to be with Oskar and I had to put him first. There wasn't a choice of, you know, to me, my other 2 children would survive because they weren't sick. Oskar was sick. And I know that probably sounds very harsh, but there had to be a hierarchy of he's up here because he's in hospital and he's
100%.
sick. And then you guys, yes, you're going to get time with me, but it's not going to be as much as what I want or you want. But, you know, that was just how it worked. I had to stop breastfeeding Thea at about 8 months because I was like, I can't keep this up. I do remember staying in the hospital at one point and Sophia was 2 months old and Oskar had gone in. I can't even remember what it was for. Probably another MRI, I think. And he stayed in the big bed, and then they had like the couch for me, and I said, well, where am I going to put Thea, because she needs to stay with me. So they had to bring a cot into the room. So it was me breastfeeding her, getting up for Oskar, doing his feeds, and the nurses were like, how are you doing this, you know, like it was just, and I think that kind of gave me the strength to keep going when people were like, you know, like you really are just like a trooper. And I was like, I kind of like, I took that as a good thing and I was like, well, thank you. But at the same time, to me, it was like, this is just, I'm just doing what I need to do for my kids. And I don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. There's no option, you know. No. And we always wanted other children. Sophia was a planned pregnancy. So we planned to have Sophia. And part of my reason for wanting another child was we were thinking Oskar would be an adult for a start. But Tommy needed a sibling he could play with. And Oskar couldn't do that. And I wanted him to have a sibling that he could play with. And also there was possibly going to be a time when Doug and I were not here and Oskar was here. That was one of the scariest thoughts, but there could be that time, and I didn't want all of that pressure to fall on Tommy. I thought if he's got 2 siblings they can kind of share it a little bit, you know, and if Oskar goes into like, say, supported independent living, or if he stays at home and has his own support workers, at least they can help with that support and they can help with the NDIS funding and all of that. And we'd always said 4 kids. That was always what me and Doug wanted. Now we're well and truly done. But we've got 2 neurotypical kids and we're happy with that. You know, we've got Oskar in heaven. But at the end of the day, we always wanted a bigger family, I guess. It was never 1 or 2 kids for us. So by the time I got to 30, I was like, right, we need to have another one now because I'm getting older and I don't want, you know, obviously you're statistically, as you get older, your eggs deplete and things can go wrong as well with chromosomes, and I didn't want another child with a disability. And as awful as that sounds, it was not.
No, it's real.
I just couldn't do it. I was like, I can't give to another child with a disability. So, so Sophia was obviously toddling around. So she would have been like 6 months old. Oskar was 4 and Tommy was like 3 and a bit. And Oskar was just over 4, yeah. And we had a really scary incident with Oskar. So he was quite sick and this is what brought on the support workers. But he was quite sick and he got rhinovirus. And with rhinovirus and chloral hydrate, obviously he was sleeping a lot. So he was on sedatives. He got rhinovirus, which makes you extremely tired. And so he was very sleepy. He was very chesty with his chest. And we'd gone to the park this day with our friends. And I'm like, he's not waking up properly. Like, you know, he's just not waking up. Like something doesn't feel right. And we'd gone home that night. And I said to Doug, look, it's probably just the rhinovirus. But I'm going to put him to bed. I'll give him a bath, put him to bed. And tomorrow morning, if he's no better, I'm going to take him to the hospital. And he's like, yeah, okay. And so I took him to the hospital the following morning, very early. It was about 7 o'clock. And within minutes, they got him straight into emergency. And I was like, okay, obviously something's going wrong, quite seriously wrong. And they said to me, like, when was the last time he woke up? And I'm like, well, just before I put him to bed last night. Like, you know, he was rouseable because I'd done a couple of sternal rubs on him actually to make sure he was waking up.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, it's very common for him to sleep like this now. Like he sleeps a lot. He has a lot of seizures. You know, he's on Epilum, he's on chloral hydrate. And they were like, yeah, okay. And they hooked him up to all the machines and Dr. Nicola came in and I became quite good friends with Dr. Nicola over the years. She was absolutely amazing at her job. And she came in and she said to me, where's your husband? And I said, I've just called him. And she said, tell him to put his car at the front. The security guards will move his car. He needs to get in the room now. And I was like, I'm sorry. And she was like, I want him in the room. And I was like, okay. And she's like, do you have a statement of choices for Oskar? And I'm like, no. And she's like, and I said, are you saying he's going to die? Do you think he's going to die? And she said, I'm not saying he's not going to die. I've had kids that have been sicker than him that have made it. But I've also had kids that haven't been as sick that have passed away. And I said, but what do you think he's got? And she said, I think he's got sepsis and I think he's got meningitis. And I was like, oh my God.
Maria.
And it was just that moment of like, why didn't I bring him earlier? You know, like, and I beat myself up. And still to this day, I do beat myself up a little bit where I'm like, I should have just taken him earlier. But I don't think the outcome would have been any different. He was already so sick anyway that weekend, I think, you know, but... So obviously he was rushed to critical care. They had femoral lines in. They rushed him actually into the emergency bay. And I rang my friend Janita and I had met Janita through the Centre of Movement, who were Oskar's therapy centre at the time. And she had a little girl called Ashana, and Ashana also has a incredibly rare syndrome. And I rang her and we'd only just sort of become friends at this point. And I called her and I said, has Ashley ever been intubated? And she's like, yeah, where are you? And I said, I'm at the Gold Coast Uni Hospital. And she's like, I'm coming now. And so she just hung the phone up. And the next thing I know, we're in recess. Doug comes running in and Janita's, oh no, Doug wasn't there. Sorry. Doug didn't come running in at this point. Janita was there first. So she came in and I just felt somebody grab my hand and it was her. And I'm like, has Ashley been intubated? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, did she come out of it? And she goes, yeah, she did. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, what do they think he's got? I'm like, they think he's got sepsis and meningitis. And she's like, oh my God. And so she's like, I'm here, you know, let's go to critical care. So they were rushing him through to critical care, and they'd actually said to me, we don't think he's going to make it to critical care. So from the emergency bay, like from resus to critical care, they did not think he was going to get there. And so as we're going, Janita's taking photos of the hospital to send to Doug to tell him where we were going, because he'd only been to critical care once at this point. So, like, you know, it was like show him where to go kind of thing. Janita got there obviously within minutes, and she came and just grabbed my hand, and I was like, you know, has Ashley been intubated before? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, did she come out of it? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And so we rushed up to critical care. She's obviously taking photos the whole way, trying to be like, this is where you go, Doug. Doug got up there, and there was like, so we were stood with 10 doctors at least outside of the room. And then they had a team of 10 people in the room, just, I don't even know how these people come together, but they were just working on Oskar basically. And, you know, putting tubes in, like he had tubes in his femoral arteries so that they could get adrenaline to him to keep his heart going. It was wild. And as Doug got there, they said, we're going to intubate. And so they just started the intubation process, which takes over their breathing and puts them basically into an induced coma. And, you know, Doug, I looked over at Doug and he just looked like a ghost. And I was like, somebody get him a chair. And so he nearly fainted, like it was horrible. And so he sat down, and he just said, like, later on, he was like, it was just too much, like looking at them all around him. And, you know, for me, I guess I was quite used to it at this point because I'd seen him in so many situations where, not where he had to be intubated, but where he was so unwell and had doctors rushing around him, that for me, it wasn't as scary as it was for Doug. And I don't know, I think I just had so much hope that he would come out of it at that point. I was like, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. It wasn't until he sort of didn't start waking up when they started taking him off the intubation that I got really scared. They did a lumbar puncture. They did all of the scans they needed to do, and basically came back and said he's got sepsis. He didn't have meningitis, thank God, but he had encephalopathy. So that is where the brain is basically swollen. And
like
so,
he hadn't been through enough.
I know. And so it was like, okay. So then they said, we're going to extubate him. I don't know the word. Extubate him, which means basically take him out of the induced coma and see how he goes. So they wean him off all the medication and see how he goes. And when they first started doing it, he wasn't waking up. And I thought, we're going to lose him. Like, he's not going to wake. How can he wake up after this? And the next day we came in, and they said, right, I was there. Sorry, I was staying there. So Doug came in the next day, and they started taking him off the medication, and he looked up, he opened his eyes, he woke up, and he went like this.
He did not.
And he smiled.
Oh my gosh.
And we were just like, are you kidding us
what
right now?
What a little legend.
He just, like, we were in awe of him by this point, because it was like, how can you possibly go through all of this and still be okay and still be happy? Like, you know, it just was wild, absolutely wild. So we brought him home after that, and that was really where our journey to losing Oskar started. So it was 18 months of basically in and out of hospital. The last year of his life, we spent 108 days in hospital. So after that episode, he ended up having something called dystonia. So it is very rare, and it's not known by, you know, a lot of people don't know anything about dystonia. Neurotypical people can get dystonia, but it generally correlates with acquired brain injuries, CP, those sorts of things. So it's where the body basically goes into dystonic positioning, which means, like, it could be, say, your neck that goes back and you can't bring your neck forward. So for Oskar, he had the worst type of dystonia, of course. It was truncal dystonia. So his entire body would twist into a position and you could not get him out of it. And it was horrific. So
just rigid, like
he would just twist like this and like go up onto his, almost onto his head. Like it was awful. And he would scream in pain. And I was like, oh my God. And he's got a high pain threshold, you know, so I can't imagine what it's like for people that don't have a high pain threshold. So then I'm looking into dystonia and thinking, how are we going to stop this, you know, from happening? And like, how are we going to fix dystonia? Because dystonia is not treatable. A lot of the time they can't treat it. And it was really, really challenging. Like that last year and a half, he was just in and out of hospital. He had pneumonia constantly. We had an episode at the Gold Coast Uni Hospital where he'd gone in for a routine EEG. By this point, we had got support workers on board. So Mark became Oscar's support worker. Shawnee is Mark's wife. So they started their company together, the Right Way Company, and they helped me basically to support Oskar day to day. Mark was incredible. I would ring him and go, I'm at the Brisbane hospital, I need you to stay overnight. And he would come up and stay overnight with Oskar and let me have a night at home with the kids. Because at this point it was impacting the kids. You know, it was impacting Tommy and Sophia. And it was impacting Doug because, you know, it wasn't impacting our marriage per se, but we hardly saw each other because it was like Doug and the kids and me and Oskar, we had to split.
Yeah.
You know, my mum and dad were having them all the time. Doug's parents were having them. Like it was just who can have the kids? And that was how it was. And, you know, we had a very good support network, but it was still extremely, extremely challenging. And,
I get it. So, we, me and Charlie, like we lived and have done, and we've recently just done another few weeks in hospital, but the Brisbane Children's private. Yeah. There's a time there where we lived there more than we lived here. Yeah, and it's so crazy. It doesn't matter how strong you are as a unit. Yeah. If you've got another child or your husband, it's just not normal. To be like that. No, it's not normal. It's not a normal way of living. And your central nervous system is just on high alert all the time. You know, you're literally in fight or flight all the time. Because you as a mum as well, you're there and you're totally in the moment with your little boy. Yeah. But your mind is at home as well with the kids. And I'm like, they need me. They're babies. And life, and there's still bills to pay, and there's still all of this life still going on. I've still got emails coming from kindy, and, you know, like it's full on. It's full on. Yeah. And so I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown, if I'm honest. I can imagine. You know, we were in hospital for this EEG for his seizures, so they could have a look at what was going on with his seizures. And they ended up saying, we're going to do a blue dye test for his stomach to look at his stomach, because his stomach, you know, he was vomiting all the time, and at the time he just wasn't gaining weight. And I'm like, he's been 12 kilos for like 2 years. You know, he's not gaining weight. Like, it's not normal. He'd got the peg tube feed in, and so... yeah, they were going to do this blue dye test, and he'd ended up, while he was having the EEG done, he'd ended up having, going to sleep and basically not waking up, which was becoming more and more common. So his GCS was, again, a 3. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like, what is going on with him? You know, is this a seizure that he's having and it's dropping his GCS down? Like, we really didn't know. And I remember being in the general children's unit, and overnight, this particular night, he was seizing all night. He'd had 40 mils of midazolam, and his GCS was a 3 the whole night. He'd had 12 met calls called. 12. To the point where on the 12th one, I actually said, you guys need to handle this. I'm going to make myself a cup of tea, and walked out and made myself a cup of tea, which would sound so weird to a lot of people, but it was so normal at that point. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I was like, I need a cuppa before we get taken down to the PICU. So when I made myself a cuppa, came back, and one of the nurses said to me, what are we doing here? And I said, well, what do you mean? And this, there hadn't been a met call for maybe an hour at this point. And he said, his GCS is still a 3. And I said, I know it is. And he said, we need to call another met call. So again, called another met call. It was just wild. And then he ended up coming back. His GCS came back up, and so we stopped all the midazolam and everything like that. And he started to make some recovery. And then they said, right, we're going to take him down for a blue dye test. And I was like, okay. So they took him down, put the blue dye down. Little did I know that they had been giving him too much baclofen. So we were basically told that his script was 10 milligrams of baclofen 3 times a day, which is a high amount for a child. That's what most adults are on that.
he was on an adult dose already. They had accidentally scripted him for 20 milligrams 3 times a day. So the nurses were obviously doing their job. It was just human error. The doctor had written
they were only following what they've been told.
Again, I never blamed anybody. It was just human error. Being in the industry that I'm in, I get it. Shit happens.
Yeah.
When he went down for the blue dye test, unfortunately, because they had overdosed him on baclofen, all of the blue dye went onto his lungs. And when he came back up to the unit, I noticed that he wasn't breathing properly. And I said, he's not breathing properly. And this nurse came running in and she said, oh, my God, his lungs collapsed. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, what do you mean? And so then it was just get him to PICU now. So we got rushed down to PICU. As we got into the PICU, his heart rate dropped to 25 beats a minute. So obviously the alarms are screaming, and Dr. Muhammad came in and he said, what do you want for his end of life? And I said, keep him comfortable. I don't want him in pain. And he said, okay. Got roger that, you know. And so then that was it. Obviously all the doctors were around him. It was very, very hectic. He wasn't intubated. He was on high flow oxygen though. And everything stable. They stabilized him basically. And I said, so what happens if he crashes again? And they were like, well, you know, we don't really know at this point. And I'm like, okay. So it turned out he also had COVID. So they had to put him in a secluded room. So we couldn't stay with him.
He's just had everything thrown at him.
Yeah.
Literally everything.
Literally everything he could have. So he had pneumonia, he had COVID, he had a collapsed lung. You know, he'd had epilepsy, his GCS was dropping to a 3 all the time. Like, we just couldn't manage it. We could not manage his needs. It was just wild. And Dr. Nicola came in, and I remember saying to her, like, hey, like, I haven't seen you for like 6 months. And she'd been up in somewhere, I think Adelaide or somewhere, doing part of her doctor thing that she had to do. And she's like, oh, is Ozzie in here? And I'm like, yeah, he's in the, COVID wing. And she's like, oh, what's going on? And I said, look, this is what's happening. And I'm looking around this PICU and I'm seeing wheelchair, right? Like outside the doors at the PICU. And, you know, you could walk through and I could see all of these children that were like teenagers, and they were, you know, basically in a vegetative state, which sounds horrific, but that is the state they were in. You know, they weren't able to move and they were all intubated. And I watched their parents coming in and out, and the stress and the trauma. And I'd also worked with people that were adults in that same position. And I thought, absolutely not. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. He either gets better or we need to put something in place to make sure that, you know, he's not resuscitated, because I'm not having him resuscitated and brought back to be in that state, to be worse than he is now. Like, what is the point? And so I spoke with Dr. Muhammad that day, and I said, I'm going to go home and speak to Doug, and I want a DNR put in place. And he was like, that's the best decision you can make. And I kind of didn't expect him to say that. I guess I expected some pushback. I expected them to be like, are you sure? You know, you need to really think about it. But there was no pushback. There was no, and I thought they know that he's very sick.
And I suppose in some way, I would imagine that kind of confirmed or validated what you were 100%. Thinking, because had they pushed back, you'd be like, Jesus, what? Come on, snap out of it. What's going on here, you know? If
they'd have pushed back, I would have been like, okay, they think he's going to get through this.
Yeah.
There was no pushback. There was basically, he's going to get worse from here. Like, we can't get him back to baseline. We were never going to get him back to baseline. We were never going to get that 4-year-old Oskar back that was happy and thriving, you know, before the seizures, basically. And that's what I had to come to terms with. And so I went home that night and I just said to Doug, I said, look, we need to put a DNR in place. And Doug was like, I can't do it. I can't sign it. And I was like, Doug, you need to put yourself in Oscar's shoes. Like, what would you want? Just say he was able to speak and communicate and you were in that position. What would you want? I'm like, it's quality over quantity. We always said that. That was our motto. Our motto was quality over quantity. We said we would give him the best life that we could. But the minute that quality of life went, then, you know, we would do the best we could for him. And this is doing the best we can for him, is putting a DNR in place. And so he was crying. Obviously, I was crying. You know, it was a very emotional time. You can't imagine the words DNR and your child being in the same sentence. And And so the next day we had a meeting with the doctors, and basically I said to them, we want the DNR put in place, and they were all on board. Dr. Nicola said, you're doing the best thing that you can for him. I'm in full support of this. We went home, and about 6 weeks later, he was again back in hospital again for lowered GCS. He had pneumonia. We were up in critical care, same situation basically all over again. And they had said to me, look, we can put him back on the general children's unit now because he's not on high flow oxygen. He's just on the normal oxygen. And I said, but all the kids downstairs have got pneumonia. You've told me that they've all got pneumonia. They're all sick. He's also got pneumonia. But it was a really big thing where all these kids were coming in with respiratory illnesses and rhinovirus. And so they were moving some of the kids from the general ward upstairs. And I said, so you're going to start putting these kids in these rooms next to Oskar? Is that what you're telling me? And they said, yeah, we are. And I was like, we're not doing this. We're going home. And so I actually asked the doctor, who was a young doctor, I said to him, I want Dr. Vu, his paediatrician, to come and have a chat with me. And we're going home today. And he was like, but he's still so sick. And I'm like, don't care. He's not dying here. So we're going home. And he's like, all right, I'll get Dr. Vu to come and talk to you. And I think this doctor was a bit sort of taken aback with me because obviously being a new doctor and then just having a mum be like, I'm not keeping my child in hospital, which for him, he thought that was the best place for Oskar. He didn't know the full story, So Dr. Vu knew the full story, and he was just he came in and I said to him, what is the plan for Oskar? And he said, well, we can try this med and we can try this med. And I said, no more meds. No. I said, what can we do for him naturally that is going to help him without putting him on clonidine and medication that are going to kill him? And he said, we can't. There is nothing else that we can do for him. And I was like, okay. I said, well, then respectfully, I'm taking him home. And he goes, okay, if that's your choice, that's fine. I would do the same thing as a parent. And so I remember that night, and I'm an agnostic person. So like I said to you before, I believe in God. But I've never had the best relationship with God, obviously being you've given me this child that's got these really high care special needs. And I think I was angry with him a lot of the time. And just before we left the hospital, I literally prayed to God. And I said, if you are real, you will not put my child through this. If you can't fix him, which you obviously can't, then take him. Take him, because I can't do this anymore and he can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. I've given the best I can to him and I can't watch him suffer. I can't. He's such a happy, beautiful person that I just can't watch him go through this. And a week to the day is when Oskar passed away.
At home.
Yeah. So my relationship with God has improved a lot since Oskar passed away because I believe in him now and I believe that Oskar is with God. And so the day that he passed away was a very normal day. I mean, he was sick. He was very sick. But it was a pretty normal day. We woke up that morning. I took Sophia to the hospital to have her arm checked because we got this massive beanbag for Oskar and it took up half the lounge room. And it was through his NDIS. It was as big as one of these, actually bigger than one of these chairs. And it was all filled with foam and he absolutely loved it. And Doug had been wrestling with Vita, and, as dads do, and throwing her off the bloody beanbag, and she'd hurt her arm. And so I had taken her to the hospital.
Always ends in tears.
And cursed his name the whole way there, going, I have to go back to the bloody hospital. And so Mum had got Ozzie and Tommy in the car, and I said, Mum, you just wait with the kids in the car. I'm not taking all three of them in. I'll take Fia in, we'll sort out. And she's like, yeah, okay. So I came back to the car after the appointment, finding out Fia's arm was just sprained, and his oxygen was sitting at 75. And I was like, okay, it's positional asphyxiation. So in the car, he used to get positional asphyxiation. And so I repositioned him and his oxygen came back up to 95. And I was like, good. He was obviously fast asleep because he's on chloral pretty much 24/7 at this point. So he was basically sedated all the time. When we got home, I put Oskar on the beanbag and Tommy was there. Sophia was upstairs having a nap in her cot. And I said to Tommy, let's watch a movie. And so we were sat behind Oskar, on the couch, and we were just laying there watching a movie. Can't tell you what the movie was. I have no idea. And I looked over at Oskar, and he was hooked up to his tube and everything. And I looked over and I just thought, oh my God, something's wrong. And he looked white, like his foot looked too white. And I ran over and, he wasn't breathing. And so I called the ambulance and I got the whole, is the patient breathing? And I said, no, he's not breathing. And, he's 5 years old and he's got a very rare syndrome. And she said, right, we're going to start CPR. And I had to tell this lady that he had a DNR. And she's like, we can't find it on the system. And I'm like, you need to find the fucking DNR because otherwise I am going to jail. You know what I mean? Like,
oh my God,
I'm going to jail because I'm not giving my child CPR right now.
That makes me feel so emotional.
And so and I'm thinking in my head, like, what kind of mum does she think I am? Not giving him CPR. And she actually said to me at one point, is there any other person there that will start CPR? And I said, no, it's me and I'm not doing it. And she was like, okay. And at that point, I was willing to go to jail. I was like, he's at peace. He is at peace. I am not bringing him back I'm not doing it, I just couldn't bring him back to that life. And
so even then, in that moment, the worst of the worst has happened and you're fighting your corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they found the DNR, thank God. The paramedics obviously came in at this point and we had a paramedic that sat down at the side of me because Oscar's on the floor. By this point, I've got him on the floor. So he sat down at the side of me. The other paramedic came over and put his fingers on Oscar's carotid artery and said there's no carotid pulse. And he took Tommy into the toy room. So he just picked Tommy up and took him into the toy room. Thank the heavens for that. And then the paramedic next to me put all the wires on Oskar and then obviously it came up and flatlined and he just said, look, I'm so sorry. And at that point, I was obviously hysterical. I was screaming. I was telling him how much I loved him and, how brave he was. And, I was hoping that he could still hear me, but I knew he wasn't there anymore. There was just that feeling inside of me. I can't explain it. Maybe it's a mother's instinct, but he was not there. That was Oscar's body.
Just a vessel.
It wasn't him. His soul was somewhere else and it was at peace. That's how I saw it. And so then it was just, obviously I had to call Doug. I don't even think I got the words out. I'm fairly sure I just said, get home. I need you here. And then I hung the phone up and Doug called back and the paramedic said, do you want me to answer? And I said, yeah, just answer the phone, please, God, answer the phone. So he grabbed the phone and he was like, obviously this is what's happened. Oscar's passed away. And Doug had to drive from work after finding out his child had just passed away. And he was there within minutes. And Sophia's still upstairs having a nap, completely oblivious to everything that's happening. And this female paramedic who had worked with Oskar, even though I had expected Oskar to pass away, I didn't really think it was going to happen that quick. I think for me, I thought he would keep fighting and keep going. The DNR was there just in case he did pass away to not have to bring him back to something worse than what he was already experiencing. And so... basically it was me and these 3 paramedics and they said, you're going to call your husband. And I called Doug, he was at work and I was just saying to him, you need to get home. I was crying, obviously, hysterically. And I couldn't tell him Oscar's passed away. I couldn't even get the words out. And then in the interim, I called my mum and she's on the phone and I'm saying to her, he's not breathing, Mum, he's gone. And she was screaming down the phone at me, give him CPR, give him CPR.
Oh.
And obviously that was horrific, but I know why she did it. It wasn't her fault. She was also in shock. And this is her grandson. She loved him more than anything in the world. So for her, it was you have to try and bring him back. He needs to be here. But for me, I was like, no, you need to stay strong, Maria. This is the decision that you and Doug have made together. And even though I spoke with Doug about it, it wasn't just my decision. It was always our decision together. I always wanted it to be our decision because I never wanted him to be able to turn around to me and say, that's not what I wanted. He wouldn't do that. But I just never wanted that to happen. And so it was our decision together. And had he have said, I can't do that 100%, we wouldn't have put the DNR in place.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was the best decision for Oskar. And I knew that even in my mind at that time, being in complete shock, I still knew what was best for Oskar. And I was still working on what was best for him. And what was best for him was to not be here in that kind of pain, you know, that sick. And so then Doug was trying to call me back, and the paramedic grabbed the phone off me and said, do you want me to talk to him? And I said, yes, please talk to him. And so he told him that Oskar had passed away. And then the female paramedic, she said to me, I'm going to get a blanket and I want you to sit on the beanbag with him. So she grabbed a blanket. Tommy was oblivious. He was playing in the toy room. Sophia was still upstairs asleep in her cot. And so I sat on the beanbag. I had the blanket that they got out the van. They wrapped it around him like this little brown blanket. And so obviously I'm holding him, and I just remember everybody coming at that point. So my parents came first, and, you know, the scream that my mum did, I will never leave my mind, ever. I don't think I'll ever forget that scream. And she just grabbed me. And, like, I can't imagine now being a mum, obviously, watching my child go through that. Like, it would have been absolutely horrific for her and my dad to have to watch me in that much pain, but also lose their grandchild at the same time. And so they were just holding me, you know, and we were all just crying together. And then Doug came, and Doug was in so much shock. Like, we did hug and we cried, but it was also like, we've got to get it together because we've got shit to do. We've got funeral plans to make. And, like, you know, like, it was, we can't break down right now.
It's again, like the logical brain kicks in.
Yeah, like the logical brain kicked in, and it was like, we can't be on the floor crying and screaming. We've only got so many hours left with him, and we need to make that time last, you know, and have the memories. And so we were hugging and obviously very upset. Doug's parents came in. His mum was really upset, and his dad. And his mum actually said, I didn't want to cry. And I'm like, who doesn't cry? She wanted to be strong for me, but I'm like, who doesn't cry in this situation? Like, anybody's going to cry, you know. And she was just holding me. And then my sister came. Janita rang me, and that was really hard because obviously she's got a daughter, and they told her Ashana was going to die when she was 6. She would pass away before she was 6. And Ashana is, thank God, still here, and she's 8 now, and she's absolutely gorgeous. But it was so hard to get those words out. And she just said to me, what's going on? Because it was very common to have ambulances at the house.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at the time, but Mark, so Oscar's support worker, had come up the wrong exit of the highway, which is crazy, right? So he wasn't even meant to exit there. And he exited on that exit, and he saw the police and the ambulance. And obviously
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, like he was like, why are the police there? So then obviously I said to Janita, Ozzie has passed away. And she just, I don't even think she said anything. She hung the phone up. And the next thing I knew, her and Shawnee were there, and Mark was there, and they were all just there. And like, everybody was in shock. You know, like, seeing a child deceased is one of the most horrific things you can ever see. And so we were all just in shock and just crying and upset. And the police cars were outside. Like, I remember seeing the police cars outside. And my dad came up to me and he said, the police are going to come and interview you. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you know, it's a death of a child. They have to interview you. They've got to do it. And I'm like, they can F off. Like, you know, like, I was just like, they are not coming in my house. Like, tell them, go and tell them. I'm going to say to you, like, go and tell them they're not coming in.
Yeah.
And he's like, they have to. Like, you don't have a choice. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? You know, and so they came in and they said, we're going to interview Doug first. So there was quite a few people, like, inside, quite a few people were outside at this point. And so they took the cameras outside and they were interviewing Doug outside. And then they came in and they said to me, we're going to interview you now. Can you pass Oskar to somebody else? And I said, absolutely not. If you want to interview me, you can interview me. Yeah, like, you're going to interview me with him in my arms. So I'm staying here. Work it out. Put your cameras where you need to put them.
Oh, what do you do? Here you go.
Yeah, like,
all right.
What do you mean? You know, and so they set the cameras up and they said to me, okay, start at the birth. And I was like, How long do you think we've got? Because I know that I've got hours before his body starts changing, and I don't want to be here for that. Like, I don't want to see his body changing rapidly, because it will be very traumatic for me seeing those changes. And his entire story is so huge. You know, it's huge. And so I just started. I said, well, you know, he was born premature, and I think I was about 5 minutes into this interview, and the bereavement nurse and Dr. Vu came in. And Dr. Vu had actually already called me before this interview, and he said, you know, Oscar's obviously passed away. I'm so sorry for your loss. We're coming out now. So when a child dies, their paediatrician comes to the house, which I didn't know. Obviously, I've not lost a child, so I didn't know what to expect.
Of course.
And the bereavement nurse literally looked at these police officers and she said, what do you think you're doing? And they said, well, we're interviewing her. She said, no, you're not. We're taking footprints and handprints. You better get in the laundry with Dr. Vu. So they all went to the laundry together.
Amazing.
They stopped the cameras.
They took control over there.
Yeah. And I think it was maybe 20 minutes later, we were taking handprints and footprints of Oskar. I've got Oscar's footprints on the inside of my arm. And we were so grateful that she did that. Like, the gratitude I have for this woman is just unreal. And, like, I didn't even know her name. I couldn't tell you her name. But she was amazing. She just came in and she said, oh, my God, he's so beautiful. And she spoke about him like he was still alive. You know, it wasn't like he was gone. And she just said, you know, you guys have done an amazing job. And she just praised us. And, you know, it was really lovely. And then after about 20 minutes, she said...
she sounds like the calm amongst this absolute
she was the calm.
chaos.
Yeah, she was the calm.
Horrendous circumstance.
So 20 minutes later, she said, you can go talk to the police. They want to talk to you now. The death certificate has been signed. And so I went to the police and they said, basically, it's a non-reportable death. So he will be taken to whichever funeral home you now want to take him to. Now, at this point, I hadn't even thought about funeral homes, to be honest with you. Like, I knew he'd have to go to a funeral home, but I wasn't thinking about in my head, like, he's going to have to be autopsied or go to, like, it just wasn't in my mind. And so non-reportable death basically means they don't autopsy them. So there has been no, you know, mishaps, like, you know, he wasn't over-medicated or anything like that. Like, they know that he's passed away from the syndrome, or things that were from the syndrome, i.e. the epilepsy. So on his death certificate, it actually says dystonia, epilepsy, and Nicolaides-Baraitser Syndrome. So it says the three things, because they couldn't really ever determine why he passed away. But I knew that I didn't want to know. I didn't want an autopsy done, because to me, he fell asleep and that's all that mattered. And he was at peace and God took him, and that was okay. You know, I didn't need to know, you know, he had a 15-minute seizure before he passed away. I didn't need to know that. No. And you could have helped him. Like, that to me would just send me mental. So I thought, I don't need to know. This is what was meant to be, and this is what's happened. And so Oskar, we organised for the funeral, like the undertakers to come. That was horrific. We got told that we could put him into Hummingbird House, deceased, and we could go there. So Hummingbird House is palliative care for children, and we could put him into like an ice box and spend time with him. And I totally understand why people do that. And like one of my best friends, Shawnee, in her culture, they keep the body for 5 days, and that is so fine. And I respect that culture, but that's not me. To me, Oscar's soul was no longer in his body. And even the 4 hours that we had with him, you know, he was so pale and so cold, and you could see the veins in the side of his head starting to become visible. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be having nightmares for the rest of my life about that. I wanted to remember him how he was, happy and loving and alive. And so I just said, no, I don't want any of that. I just want them to come and take him. And they said, okay, that's fine. So we rang them and they came at 8 o'clock with their tiny stretcher. And I don't know how they do that job.
Me either.
And we put him into these little pajamas with his favourite pajamas with the cars on it. And, you know, they zipped the bag up. And it was one of the worst moments of my life watching them drive away. It was like, how, you know, and just how are we going to live without him was you know, like, sorry.
Don't be sorry. You okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, you know, in my brain, I knew that we would find a way. Like, we'd always found a way to make it work. And I just thought, he's at peace now and he's free and he's happy. And we were able to spend time with him at the funeral home. And the funeral director, oh, she was amazing. She was so amazing. And she took such good care of him. And he was always dressed beautifully. And, you know, he was obviously had makeup on. But, you know, he was just taken care of so well while he was there. And I remember thanking her and just, she was like, he touched me like and he did with everybody, like everybody loved him. And at the funeral, like we had a celebration of life as well. We didn't want it to be a funeral. So we made everybody wear yellow. We were like, we're going to have his favourite colour. His favourite colour is yellow. And we want everybody to wear yellow. And the funeral day was just a sea of yellow, you know. And I did a speech. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, but I was like, I've got to do a speech for him. And so I just spoke about how amazing he was and, you know, how we would continue to honour his legacy and that we wouldn't stop fighting to make sure that kids like him got what they needed, you know, and that things changed so that the world viewed children like Oskar differently, because there just isn't enough out there, like knowledge-wise, on these kids and what the families go through. And like we had no support from the government. There was no support. Like, and I'd worked in Australia from being 15 years of age and I got $140 a fortnight on a carer's payment, carer's assistance or something like that. Doug's was on $75,000 a year and that was too much for us to get carer's payment, which would have essentially been a wage for me. But we couldn't have that, you know, and it still annoys me to this day that, you know, we halved our wage and that the government didn't look at that and go, this mum is at home every day with her child. She needs to be there with her child every single day to keep him alive.
Because if you were, sorry, edit that little part, baby. If you chose to put Ozzie in care while you worked.
I did. So I did put him into kindy and I started my own business at one point and I had some money coming in. But I had to train the staff on epilepsy and tube feeds. And this kindy, like his teachers were unreal and they just took it on board. But not every kindy would have done that.
No.
Then he went to ECDP. So I was running my own business, working as an assistant nurse in the community. But it still wasn't enough wage.
No.
Because I was in and out of work constantly.
Course. Because he was stopped in and out of hospital.
Yeah, and then if he'd have a seizure at kindy, I'd have to run in there. You know what I mean? Yeah. If he vomited at kindy, I'd have to run in there. Like it was... You couldn't relax. I couldn't relax and just go to work like I do now. It just wasn't the same.
And you didn't just have one child. You didn't just have Ozzie. You had 3 children.
Yeah, and not that I expected the government to fully support me, but I just thought some sort of income would have been nice.
I agree.
You know, and so it was really, really frustrating. And we relied on family and we relied on GoFundMes and stuff like that to help get us through.
Of course.
And even now, like we've said, we had a friend from America who made it's a mobility device for children over there, and he asked me what Oscar's favourite colours were, which were purple and yellow, and these people are just the most amazing people in the world. They've planted a tree over in Kansas for Oskar as well when he passed away.
Gorgeous.
And he's also got a tree in Scotland. And so David and Michelle organised this mobility device. It's like a little wheelchair. To be made with a 3D printing machine. And so the cost, amazing. You basically pay for the cost of the material. And so they've had one made already and that went out last week. And we've already said like every year on Oscar's, so he passed away on the 13th of September. So on his like Memorial Day, we're going to have 4 or 5 made. And they're going to go out in America to children that need them. So amazing. We're already organising all of these things so that we can honour his memory. And it's just so beautiful that even though he's no longer here, he's still here in his own little way.
And he's still making a difference,
The centre in Kansas messaged me and said it had been raining for 3 days. And when they got the wheelchair, they took it outside to do some photos and the sun came out. And I was like, oh my God, he's there.
You're like, of course it did.
Of course it did. It's Oskar. And like, you know, I always used to sing to him, "You Are My Sunshine." And the first day that I was at work, my first ever shift, someone started playing "You Are My Sunshine" on the piano upstairs. And I'm like, he's still here. He's showing me that he's still here. And, you know, it's horrific. Losing a child is horrific. But one of my big things, you know, like I said to you, is happiness and grief can coexist. They can coexist, but you just need to balance them. It's a fine line. Like, I still have the most horrific days sometimes where, like, even probably 2 weeks ago on a Sunday, Doug was at home and he's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I just can't today. Like, I just miss him so much. And he's like, okay. And I just had a bad day. Like, I literally just wanted to lay in bed and look through memories of him, you know, and that's what I did. I just sat there and I just honored my feelings and I looked through memories of him and I appreciated all the memories and I cried and I laughed and I did all the things, you know, and it makes me feel better at the end of the day. And then it's like, okay, now I can go on. Now I can keep going. And the next morning I woke up, I was like, okay, we're ready to do this again. And, you know, having Doug and Sophia and Tommy, I can't break down because they need me. You know, Tommy and Sophia are still grieving in their own little way. They brought these little love hearts. So we got Oscar's hands printed in 3D. And they got these love hearts the other day for Mother's Day. And they came home and said, can we put them in Oscar's hands? And I'm like, yeah, you can. So on Oscar's memory table at home, we had his body cremated too, so we could take it with us. Yeah. So where he is on his table, he's got his little hands there, and they both got a little love heart sitting in them.
That's so beautiful.
And we honour him all the time. Like Mother's Day, they did, like they painted this butterfly last year on Mother's Day. On Father's Day, we got like a big, like a thing of cardboard in yellow, and we put like Happy Father's Day, Dad, and I put all photos of Oskar. So he's always a part of us. Like, that will never ever change. And my children will be raised that, you know, he is a part of us and he's always a part of them and he's always watching them. And obviously I said to you about writing the book as well. I always said I was going to do that when Oskar was here alive, and it just came to me the other day. I was like, I need to start that journey of writing a book, so that it helps other people, hopefully, and makes them realise that, you know, you always think you're not going to be that person that has a child with special needs. You always think, like, you read the stories about these kids with rare genetic syndromes and you think, that's not going to be me. But sometimes it is. Sometimes that is your life story and you just don't know it yet, you know. And, yeah, I think, like, there are positives in every negative. And I believe that Oskar is with God and he's with Jesus and he's running around up there and he's able to do everything that his body here on earth couldn't do. You know, he was trapped in his body here.
Yeah.
And so in heaven, he's no longer trapped. He's able to do all the things that he couldn't do here on earth. And that's how I get through every single day. Otherwise I wouldn't, you know, and wanting to go and, you know, like I said, finish my registration and go on to do palliative care nursing. Like, that is the end goal for me. To help other people that are in that situation and to make it a peaceful environment. And, you know, the way that people pass away, it can either go one way or another. And if you can make it peaceful, and that's sometimes just having nice smelling things and, you know, having beautiful music playing and making sure they've got flowers in their room and that the window's open so there's light coming in, and all of those things make such a difference to someone's end of life care. And, you know, working in aged care has taught me that even more so, there is something else out there that we can't see, but you can make that end of life beautiful. It doesn't need to be...
It's just a transition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a transition from this world into the next.
Correct.
And I want to be able to help people with that. And yes, it's sad at times. And yes, I come home crying. And the first couple of people that we lost, I was hysterically crying. Like, I was so upset. And I genuinely didn't know if I could do it. And there's still days that I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you thinking? You know, like, can you really do this with your trauma that you've already been through? But I want to take that trauma and make it, like, put it into something good and help other people with that trauma and go, you know, if I got through this, you can get through it too. Yeah. Yes, it's going to be shit and it's going to be hard and you're going to have the worst days sometimes, but it's going to be okay. And, like, would they want you to sit down and, you know, not do anything with your life and, you know, not get up out of bed every day? No, they wouldn't. They would be up there saying, come on, get up, keep going. Like, just because I'm not here doesn't mean you can't live the rest of your life. So I believe everybody's life has a purpose, and sharing Oskar's story is part of my purpose. That is 100% part of my purpose. But yeah, going back to the medical records. So They deleted those 2 days after he passed away.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah, so his medical records on his My Health records was huge. It was, I reckon, 8 pages. And, like, they go for a long time when you go through them. Like, they, you know, and it was probably 2 days after he passed away. I wanted to look on there. And the reason why I wanted to look on there, and maybe I wasn't supposed to, but part of the reason why I wanted to do was to make sure we'd done everything, that we had covered everything. And, you know, that part of my brain was like, could you have done something else? And I just wanted to look on there and go yes or no. And it was all deleted. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, why would they delete it unless they've got something to hide? So I still haven't accessed those records. To get access to them, I have to actually order another birth certificate for him because I can't find his birth certificate. So it means ordering a birth certificate for my deceased child, which I'm not going to do. I have his death certificate, obviously, but to get the records, you have to get a birth certificate and then you can access the records. And I've kind of decided that I'm probably not meant to access them because I would drive myself crazy and I would probably find things that would make them liable for certain things. And is it really worth it? No, it's not. Like, do I really want to go into a court case? No, I don't. I want to use that energy to honour Oscar's memory and to keep his memory alive. I don't want to be fighting people and constantly wondering, could we have done something different, or did they do this wrong? Did they do this wrong? You know,
just exhausting on every
Yeah,
level.
it is exhausting.
You're already, you know, there's so much weight and exhaustion and, you know, emotion and grief and everything else.
That's right. And the way that I see
it's taking it away from him, isn't it?
100%. It's taking that energy that I want to put into him away from him and going, well, I'm now going to put it into all these medical records, which is not going to help me, you know. No. And at the end of the day, I don't want to sue anybody.
It shouldn't have happened. They
should have taken it off there. But it's also, it wasn't meant to be, you know. And you have to look at the doctors and nurses and, like, they did so much for him. Like, these people did so much for Oskar. And I also think, like, is it worth going and looking at the minute things that they failed? Probably not.
For all our listeners, if you know anyone who's going through anything similar and you want to share this, please share, like, and share to as many people as possible so we can get Maria's story out with beautiful Oskar. And that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Aww.